For creating the drawer, you will need a few pieces of medium weight chipboard, the regular one that we used for the rest of our project. I have all the pieces here on my desk. Let me take you through the measurements. The largest piece, which will be the bottom, like the central part of the drawer, will measure 8.5 inches by 6 3/4. Two long pieces for the sides of the drawer will measure 8.5 by 2 1/8. So two of those, and two shorter pieces for the sides will measure 6 7/8 by 2 1/8. I also want you to prepare another piece that will be used for the front panel and the drawer pull, and this piece will measure 8 3/4 by 2 1/4, and we will set this piece aside for now and get back to it later. As usual, we will work with hinges, and we will start with attaching the longer panels to the central part of the drawer. We will need two hinges that measure 8.5 inches long by 1 inch wide. They're scored in the middle along the long side, and I have trimmed the corners. You are, as usual, welcome to use your score tape or wet glue. I'm going to use wet glue. And then I will glue the hinge to the chipboard piece, starting from the very corner, and just making sure that I do not overlap the score line. Burnish, fold again if you need to, and now I will apply the glue to the second half of the hinge. And now I'm keeping this piece standing on the desk, and I attach the central part of the future drawer, the largest piece of the chipboard, right next to the side panel, so that there is no gap between them. Let's unfold it. We will work on the second one. We will attach the hinge the same way to the chipboard panel by applying glue to one half of the hinge at first and gluing it down to the long chipboard piece. Now apply the glue to the second half of the hinge. Keep it in a standing position like so on your desk, and attach the large piece with the long panel right next to the long panel on the right hand side. Don't forget to burnish. Now you can unfold, burnish again. Next, I will take a few more hinges. This hinge also measures 8.5 inches long. I will need two of those, and I will glue them down right along the edge of the chipboard of the middle section, like so. Do not overlap the gap. You are still able to see the gap even after you glue the hinge down. So I will glue both of these on the long sides of the central piece, like that. They're glued down, and as you can see, this half of the hinge is still not glued. We will do that later. Now we will take care of the hinges for the short sides, and we need two of the hinges, which are 6 3/4 of an inch long, so that they fit on these sides nicely. So I will glue them down right now, right along the edge of the chipboard, like so. So if you fold the hinge, this edge here needs to be flush. Now at this stage, you can take a piece of pattern paper of your choice, and that's the paper that I chose for my inside bottom of the drawer. This piece measures 8 1/4 by 6 1/2, and I will go ahead and glue it down right here. And it's done. Now let's move to the shorter panels. So they're 6 7/8 of an inch long. And here I have the hinges that will connect the panels to our drawer. They are also 6 7/8 of an inch in length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue, as usual, only half of the hinge to the side panel from corner to corner up to the score line. Make sure that you burnish and then fold again, just for making sure that you have a nice straight angle there. Do the same with the second hinge and the second short panel, like that. Now I want to go ahead and glue the side hinges to the short panels at this point. I have a few of them here. You will need 4 right now, and they are 2 1/8 of an inch, just the same as the width of our short panel. So I'm going to glue them down only by 1/2 of the hinge from corner to corner, making sure that I do not overlap the score line. I'm sure you already know the drill, and make sure that you have nice straight corners here. I will glue the second one on the opposite side. Then do the same with 2 more hinges and the second short panel. And this is what you'll have. Now I suggest that you apply double-sided tape to the short hinges. Burnish. And what we're going to do next, let me explain first, and then I will go ahead and do that. So this piece will go in here like so. The side hinges, the short side hinges on this piece will be wrapped around the long panels of our drawer. And then your corner should look like that. So the long panel will get up to the edge of the short panel like this on both sides. So it will not be like that. If you can see the difference, it will be like that on both sides. So for doing that, I will now remove the backing from the score tape, and I will apply the glue to this long hinge. I'm keeping this on my working surface like that, and I'm attaching the rest of the drawer right next to this panel, and I just want to make sure that I form a nice straight angle here, and then I will use the side flap for quickly catching the panel, the long panel on the side. And then I will make sure that I attach 2 of the pieces nicely together and burnish here where I used the wet glue, so that that hinge at the bottom already starts to glue down to the rest of the drawer. And then I will burnish the hinges on the side where the score tape is. And this way, our corners should look perfect. They should be in place. And this hinge is also attached nicely to the bottom. That procedure is the same for attaching the second panel to the rest of the drawer. And this should be our result so far. Now I am going to fold in these flaps on the inside of the drawer. And then I have here 4 more hinges, which are, they should be 2 1/8 of an inch, but as you can see, you might need to trim just a hair of it so that it's not sticking out from the corner there. So I'm trimming the corners nicely. I think I need to trim more. And I'm measuring before applying the glue and gluing the hinge down. So now it looks fine to me. I will go ahead and apply the glue to the hinge itself. And again, if you are not comfortable with using wet glue for this purpose, you are welcome to use the double-sided tape. So I'm applying the glue, and I'm also applying just a little bit of glue right into the fold. And now I'm gluing this hinge into the corner. And of course, we have to burnish. When you burnish, just make sure that you do not move the hinge, because it will want to do that sometimes while the glue is wet and the hinge just slides on the surface of the chipboard. So make sure that it stays in place right in the corner, and then do the same for the remaining 3 hinges. And now when the hinges are attached, you can go ahead and glue the second halves of the inside hinges to the side panels of the drawer. It will look like that. So do the same for the remaining 3 hinges. And here we go. So what's left is to cover the raw edges of the chipboard with some more hinges here at the top. And I have 2 hinges which are 6 7/8 of an inch long for the shorter panels, and 2 more which are 8.5 for the longer ones. So how we glue them down, again, I'm going to use the wet glue, applying the glue to 1/2 of the hinge and then align it with the corner of this panel. I'm aligning it with the corner of the long panel of the drawer, not the outer corner of the whole drawer. The exposed corner here will be covered with the 6 7/8 of an inch long hinge. So it will be all covered, but the longer pieces will cover only these sections. I am now applying the glue to the rest of the cardstock and glue the rest of it down to the chipboard like so. Don't forget to burnish on the edge. Makes the edge nice and crisp. Let me do this on the opposite side here, like this. And then I'm applying 2 shorter hinges the same way, but you might need to trim on the flap which goes inside the drawer in the corners just a little bit so that it fits better in. So I'm going to do this. I'm removing just a little bit of the cardstock from this area, but I still want to keep it where it is going to cover the chipboard in the corner, so that it is folded nicely in here, but still covers the chipboard in the very corner right there. The way of attaching it is absolutely the same as we did with the longer hinges. I am aligning it with the corner of the side panel, with the corner of the short side panel, and burnish. And now you can apply glue to the rest of the hinge. Burnish on the edge, fold the flap in, and then burnish. And this is how the corners should look like. So let me do the same for this side. Okay, here we go. Now you can distress all the edges with the distress ink. That's exactly what I'm going to do now. And then it would be a good idea to make sure that our drawer fits in the place which is designated for it. And I think it does. I hope it worked for you too. Now what's left to do here is add some papers to the inside of the drawer. And I have a few pieces that I have prepared for it. Let me tell you the measurements. So I decided to use the plain paper on the inside of the drawer, and on the outside I'm going to use the printed pattern paper. So for the inside of the short panels, I have here two pieces, and they measure 6.5 by 1 7/8, and I'm going to glue them down right here. Now for the inside long panels, I have also prepared two cardstock pieces, and by the way, I distressed the edges of these ahead of time, and they both measure 8.25 by 1 7/8. So glue them down here. Now, before you glue the second piece, you have to decide if you want the front panel that we will use for our drawer, if you want this front panel to be attached with the brads to the inner panel of the drawer as well, or you can mat this panel with a plain paper right now, and then you will use the brads and attach the drawer pull only to this front panel of the drawer, and it means that the brads will go only through one layer of chipboard. And yeah, so that's the main thing that you have to decide right now before adhering the paper to this part of the drawer, because if your brads will go through both layers of chipboard, they will be seen here. So only after you attach the front panel, you will be able to glue the paper down here and cover the tails of the brads. I think I will poke the holes through both layers of the chipboard, just to be on the safe side that over time, even if some of the glue dries or I don't know what happens, this panel is there forever. Okay, so that doesn't prevent us from matting the side panels of the drawer and from matting the back panel as well as the bottom. So for the bottom, I'm going to use again just some plain piece of craft cardstock, and it measures the same as this piece, and it is 8 1/4 by 6 1/2. So I'm going to glue that down now like this. Then for this section of the drawer, I have another craft cardstock piece, and it is that part of the drawer that will go in first, and you will barely see that, so that's why I decided to use just some plain cardstock here. So this piece measures 8 1/2 by 1 7/8. I'm gluing it down right here. It's done. And then for the sides, I have 2 pieces of pattern paper, and here you can see the measurements: 6 5/8 by 1 7/8. And I'm gluing them down like so. And it's done. So I have here a drawer pull that I'm going to use, and you are welcome to use whichever designs of pulls that you have. You might want to use something with only one screw or one hole, or you might want to use some wooden pulls and just glue them down right to the front of the drawer without even having to use any brads. I don't know what you have in your stash, but this is what I have. So this pull has 6 holes, so I will have to use 6 brads for attaching this to the front panel of my drawer. And as you remember, you have already cut a chipboard piece for that front panel. It measures 8 3/4 by 2 1/4. For wrapping this chipboard piece, we'll need a piece of craft cardstock, and it will measure 9 3/4 by 3 1/4, so that we have flaps of at least 1/2 inch on all the 4 sides. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue the chipboard down to the cardstock, just making sure that I do my best to center it like this. Now let's train the paper to fold. I'm folding the long sides first and then the short ones, just breaking the fibers of the paper so that it's easier for me to glue them down. You can use your bone folder as well, especially on the edges of the chipboard. And this way we train the cardstock to fold the way we need it to fold. Okay, now once we have that done, we have to miter the corners. And I'm going to use my corner mitering tool that you might have seen in some of my other tutorials. So what it does, it allows me to cut the angle at 45 degrees like so, and it also leaves about I guess 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the paper to the corner of the chipboard. And then later on it will allow me to wrap it nicely around the corner and cover it with the cardstock. So I'm going to miter all 4 corners. This is what we have, and I'm going to apply glue to the flaps and glue them down to the chipboard. I'm making sure to apply some glue to the very edge of the chipboard. I'm also going to squeeze down the cardstock here in the corners. So I'm pressing it down right next to the edges, like so. I will do the same on the opposite side. And now we can glue down the short side flaps. Our front panel is now wrapped in craft cardstock. You can go ahead and distress the edges. Now I'm ready to take the piece of the pattern paper that I will use for matting the front panel of the door, and this piece measures 8.5 by 2 inches. I drew the guidelines, the horizontal and the vertical one, for finding the center of this piece. And now I am going to see where I want to poke the holes for attaching the drawer pull. I will currently use a pencil for just marking them, like so. And as you can see, there are 2 holes right on the vertical guideline. So now I'm going to use my poking tool and poke the holes through. I can see the holes on the front side of the paper. I am going to glue the paper down to the chipboard now, and once it's glued down, I will poke through the same holes, both through the paper and the chipboard, to transfer them to the back of the chipboard. And it looks like this now. We have the holes here on the chipboard. So next thing that we're going to do, we're going to glue this panel down to our drawer. And as you can see, this panel is a little bit wider than the drawer itself. It is done for a reason. And when gluing the panel down to the drawer, you will just make sure that you kind of center it from the left and the right side, and then the panel will be at the same level as the drawer itself at the bottom, and you will have a little border at the top here. So let me explain to you how I plan to glue this down. I will use some strong glue for almost the whole back area of the front panel, and then I will add just a little bit of hot glue on the left and on the right, somewhere here, and that's for making sure that the panel stays in place and doesn't shift once I glue it down. Okay, so let's do that together, and I will just speed up this process. Now, when I'm holding everything on my desk, I am quickly attaching this panel and make sure that I have equal borders on the left and the right of the drawer. You will do your best, okay? So that's what we have right now. I think the hot glue starts to cool down at this point, but it keeps the panel attached to the drawer, and that's what we need. I'm going to poke the holes again now through the second layer of chipboard, like so, and I'm going to use brads for attaching the pull to the drawer itself. I have added the brads, and now I have to open the tails here on the back side and just flatten them down. That's how it looks, and we will now take that piece of craft paper that we had before. It is the same size as the paper which is glued down to this panel, 8 1/4 by 1 7/8, and we're going to glue it down right there, and this will finish off our drawer. This drawer is done. Now you will have to rewind the video and create the second drawer the same way as you created the first one. And as you can see, I tried to keep the design ongoing on the front panels. Let's take our journal station and slide the drawers in. I think they look great. So for matting the sides of the station, here I went ahead and already added the paper to the back, and I once again apologize for the size of this project and for the fact that I cannot zoom the camera out. So I hope you see what I'm talking about. So this back panel is quite big, as you remember. So the printed page design that like the maximum size I could go was not enough for covering the whole back of this project. So I cut a piece of craft cardstock, which was 11 3/4 in my case by 8 7/8, and then I printed borderless page of this design on the letter size paper, which is 8 1/2 by 11. I glued it down to the craft cardstock base, and I added some zigzag stitching all around. That's just because I wanted to do that. You don't have to. If you are using any other kind of paper and the size of it is enough for covering the whole back of this project, of course you don't need to add any other mats below the paper with the design, but I thought I am going to do that. And then for the sides, the papers for the sides, let me just remind you the size. It is 6 3/4 on the short side by 9 inches on the long side. So that's what I have here. Then the bottom is covered with another piece of craft cardstock, and it measures 11 3/4 by 6 7/8. Now for the top, I have a few ideas as per how I want to embellish the top of this journal station, since it is going to be a home for a few journals of different Victoria Designs paper collections, and they will all be about nature. I think I am going to leave the top for now, and I'm going to embellish it a little bit later, as soon as I have a better idea of how to do that, because I want the embellishments on the top to convey the idea of this whole project, so to say. I want the top embellishments to have both animals and butterflies and birds and plants on it. So for that reason, I will keep it plain for now, for this tutorial. And as we move along, we can decide how we want to embellish that. If you are very impatient, you can just measure and cover the top section here with the paper of your choice, the way you want to do that. But as for me, I will leave it plain for now. Okay, so the journal station is done. It was a huge project to complete. I really hope that you were able to follow along, and now comes even the more fun part, where we're going to create the journal with the gorgeous butterflies, and the journal will go in one of the compartments of this station.